Welcome to Learn English by Reading. Hello, friends. My name is Leo, and in this channel, we will learn English together through fun and easy stories. Reading is a very good way to improve your English. When you read, you learn new words, correct grammar, and how sentences are built. You also practice listening and understanding English if you follow along with the video. Today, we have a very special story, The Ant and the Grasshopper. This is a famous story with a big meaning. It teaches us about hard work, planning, and friendship. Don't worry if some words are new. I will read slowly and clearly. You can listen and repeat after me. Each chapter of the story is easy to understand, and it is made for beginner and elementary learners. You will enjoy the story and learn English at the same time. You can also pause the video and read along. Try to remember new words and phrases. By the end of the story, you will learn not only English, but also an important life lesson. Reading English stories is a fun way to practice every day. You can improve your vocabulary, your reading skills, and your listening skills. So, sit comfortably. Take a notebook if you want, and let's start our English journey with The Ant and the Grasshopper. Chapter 1. A sunny day in the meadow. It was a beautiful summer morning. The sun was shining brightly in the clear blue sky. The grass looked fresh and green, and small flowers danced in the light wind. Birds were singing happily, and bees were buzzing around the flowers. The air was warm and full of life. It was the kind of day that made everyone feel cheerful. In the middle of the wide meadow, an ant was walking slowly but carefully. He carried a small piece of food on his back. It looked heavy, but the ant did not stop. He was busy and serious about his work. The ant's name was Andy. Every morning, Andy left his small home under a rock and began his daily job. He collected food and carried it back to his nest. Sometimes he worked all day under the hot sun, but he never complained. Andy knew that summer would not last forever. He knew winter would come soon, and there would be no food to find then. So, he worked hard every day, saving food for the cold season. While Andy was walking, he heard a cheerful sound nearby. Someone was singing a happy song. The voice came from a green leaf not far away. Andy turned his head and saw a bright green grasshopper sitting on the leaf. The grasshopper had a big smile on his face and a small violin in his hands. He was playing music and singing loudly. His name was Gary, and he loved to sing and dance. The sound of his song filled the air with joy. "Hello, Andy," Gary called with a wide smile. "What a wonderful day. The sun is shining, the flowers are blooming, and the world is beautiful. Why don't you stop working for a while and enjoy the music with me?" Andy stopped for a moment and looked up at Gary. The ant was sweating a little, but he smiled politely. "Good morning, Gary," he said. "Yes, it's a lovely day, but I have work to do. I must carry this food back home before the sun gets too hot." Gary laughed and played another note on his violin. "Oh, Andy, you always work, work, work. Don't you ever relax? Life is too short to spend every day working. Come and sing with me." Andy shook his head gently. "I like your music, Gary, but I can't stop now. Winter will come before you know it, and I must be ready. When the cold days arrive, you will see why I'm working so hard today." Gary waved his hand carelessly. "Winter? That's so far away. Look around, my friend. The sun is shining, the world is green, and we have plenty of time. Why worry about winter now? Let's enjoy today. Andy smiled again, but said nothing more. He picked up his food and continued walking toward his home. Gary watched him go and shrugged his shoulders. Then he began another song, even louder and happier than before. He sang about the sunshine, the flowers, and the freedom of summer. The melody floated across the meadow like a soft breeze. As the day passed, Gary played music and danced while Andy worked. The ant moved back and forth many times, carrying seeds, crumbs, and leaves to his nest. Sometimes he stopped to drink a drop of water or rest under a leaf, but he always returned to his job. Gary, on the other hand, never stopped singing. He sang for the butterflies, for the bees, and even for himself. He didn't think about the future. He only cared about the joy of the moment. When the sun began to go down, the sky turned orange and pink. The air became cool, and the meadow grew quiet. The birds flew home, and the bees disappeared into their hives. Andy finished his last trip and stood outside his nest, tired but happy. He looked up at the sky and felt proud. His home was now full of food. He smiled and whispered, "One more good day of work." Not far away, Gary was still lying on a soft patch of grass, looking at the colorful sunset. He felt peaceful and lazy. "Ah," he said, "life is beautiful. Who needs to worry about tomorrow?" Then he closed his eyes and played one last tune before going to sleep. That evening, the meadow was calm and silent. The ant slept inside his safe home, and the grasshopper slept under the open sky. Both were happy in their own way. But as the night grew cooler, a soft wind passed through the field. The stars twinkled above, and the world slowly changed from day to night. It was a gentle reminder that summer would not last forever, and that every day the world was quietly moving toward winter. Chapter 2. The Busy Little Ant. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the meadow. Soft golden light touched the flowers and the tall grass. The air was cool, and tiny drops of dew shone like diamonds on the leaves. Andy the ant woke up early, just as he did every day. He stretched his small legs, cleaned his antennae, and looked around his little home. It was a busy day ahead. Andy lived inside a small but strong ant hill under a big rock. His home had many small rooms and tunnels. Inside, other ants were also working hard. Some were cleaning the tunnels, some were carrying food to the storage room, and some were taking care of baby ants. The ant hill was always full of activity. Every ant had a job to do. Andy was one of the gatherers. His job was to go out into the meadow and collect food, grains, seeds, crumbs, and small pieces of leaves. It was not an easy job, but Andy enjoyed it. He knew his work helped the whole ant family survive. When everyone worked together, they were strong and safe. He picked up a small seed and carried it carefully out of the anthill. The seed was heavy for his tiny body, but Andy didn't mind. He loved the feeling of doing something useful. Outside, the world was bright and alive. Birds were flying in the sky, butterflies danced above the flowers, and bees were buzzing busily nearby. Andy smiled and whispered to himself, "Another good day to work." As he began walking across the grass, he heard a familiar sound, a cheerful tune floating through the air. It was Gary the Grasshopper again. He was sitting on a leaf, playing his violin and singing happily. His voice was light and full of joy. "Good morning, Andy," Gary called out. "Out so early again? You never rest, my friend." Andy looked up and waved his antennae politely. "Good morning, Gary. Yes, there's a lot to do. I must collect enough food for the coming winter." Gary laughed. "Winter, winter, always winter. You ants think too much about work. Look at the sky, feel the sunshine. The day is so beautiful. Come, sing a song with me." Andy smiled kindly but shook his head. "Maybe later, Gary. I have a lot to carry today. Every grain counts." Gary sighed and leaned back on the leaf. "You worry too much, Andy. There's plenty of food everywhere." "Why hurry?" But Andy didn't answer. He was already walking away with his seed. Step by step, he moved across the ground, climbing over small stones and leaves. Sometimes, the seed rolled away, and Andy had to chase it. But he never gave up. He worked carefully and patiently, making sure not to waste a single piece. The sun climbed higher, and the day grew hotter. The grasshopper kept playing music and relaxing, while the little ant worked without rest. Every now and then, he saw other ants carrying food too. They greeted each other with small nods and cheerful words. "Keep going." "Almost there." "Good job." The ants supported one another like a true team. By noon, Andy had already carried many pieces of food back to his nest. His legs were tired, but his heart was happy. When he entered the anthill, the other ants smiled at him. They took the food and stored it neatly inside the rooms. "Thank you, Andy," one ant said. "Your hard work keeps us safe." Andy felt proud. "We all work together," he replied. "That's what makes us strong." After a short rest, he went out again. The afternoon's sun was warm, but Andy didn't stop. He looked across the meadow and saw Gary lying under the shade of a big flower. The grasshopper was half asleep, his violin resting beside him. Andy watched him for a moment and thought, "He is happy now. But when winter comes, will he still smile?" The thought made Andy work even faster. He picked up another piece of food and carried it home. The wind began to blow softly, and a few dry leaves fell to the ground. Andy noticed that some of the grass had started to turn yellow. The days were still warm, but the signs of change were beginning. As the evening came, Andy finished his work for the day. He stood at the entrance of his anthill and looked around. The sky was painted with orange and purple colors. Birds were flying back to their nests, and the air smelled of fresh grass. Andy felt tired but satisfied. "I did my best today," he whispered. "Tomorrow, I will do more." In the distance, Gary played one last tune before nightfall. His song was soft and dreamy, floating through the quiet meadow. Andy listened for a while and smiled. He liked Gary's music, even if he didn't understand his laziness. Then he went inside his warm home, ready to rest and prepare for another busy day. Outside, the stars began to appear one by one. The night was calm and peaceful. The ants slept in their safe anthill, while the grasshopper dreamed under the open sky. Two friends, two very different lives, one working hard for tomorrow, the other living only for today. Chapter 3. The Singing Grasshopper. The sun rose high above the green meadow. The air was warm, and a gentle breeze moved through the tall grass. It was another bright summer day, full of life and sound. Birds were singing, bees were buzzing, and butterflies were dancing from flower to flower. In the middle of the field sat Gary the grasshopper, his violin shining in the sunlight. Gary loved mornings like this. He stretched his long legs and smiled at the beautiful world around him. "Ah, what a perfect day for music," he said aloud. He picked up his violin and began to play a cheerful tune. The sweet sound floated through the air like a song of joy. As he played, other insects stopped to listen. A ladybug sat on a flower, tapping her tiny feet. A butterfly fluttered nearby, moving gently to the rhythm. Even a small bee paused for a moment before flying away again. Gary felt happy. He loved to make others smile with his music. He sang loudly, "The sun is bright, the sky is blue, the grass is green, the world feels new. Why work so hard? Why worry so much, when life is sweet with nature's touch?" Gary laughed at his own song. He believed that life should be simple and full of fun. Every day was a gift, and he didn't want to waste it by working like the ants did. After a while, he saw Andy the ant walking through the grass, carrying a heavy piece of food on his back. Gary waved his violin bow and shouted, "Hey, Andy! Come and listen to my new song. It will make your day brighter." Andy looked up. He was already tired from walking since early morning, but he smiled politely. "Hello, Gary. I would love to listen, but I can't stop right now. I have to carry this food back to my nest before the sun sets." Gary shook his head and laughed. "Oh, Andy, you always talk about work, work, work. Don't you ever feel bored? Life is not only about working. You must also enjoy the sunshine." Andy smiled gently. "You may be right, Gary, but if I don't work now, I may have nothing to eat later. When winter comes, the sun will not shine like this, and there will be no food to find." Gary played another tune and said, "Winter? Don't talk about winter now. Look around. Everything is beautiful. The flowers are blooming, the air is soft, and there's food everywhere. Why worry about something that hasn't come yet?" Andy sighed but didn't argue. "I hope you're right," he said kindly. "Take care, Gary." Then he walked away, carrying his load of food with steady steps. Gary watched him go and shook his head. "That poor ant," he said. "He doesn't know how to live." Then he laughed again and started to play faster and louder. Soon Gary had a small audience. A family of crickets joined him, clapping their wings in rhythm. A dragonfly hovered above, enjoying the tune. Gary felt proud. He danced and sang as if the whole world was his stage. He sang songs about summer, friendship, and freedom. He didn't think about time or the coming seasons. He only wanted to enjoy the moment. As the day went on, the sun grew hotter. Gary began to feel hungry, so he stopped playing for a while and looked for something to eat. There were plenty of fresh leaves and grass nearby. He nibbled a few and felt full again. Life was easy, and food was always around. He thought, why save food like the ants? There's always more to eat tomorrow. After resting, Gary lay on his back, watching the clouds move across the sky. Each cloud had a different shape. One looked like a bird, another like a mountain. He laughed softly. "This is the good life," he said to himself. "Music, sunshine, and peace. What else do I need?" As the sun began to go down, the meadow turned golden. The warm light made everything glow beautifully. Gary picked up his violin once more and played a soft song for the evening. His music filled the quiet air as the birds returned to their nests. In the distance, Andy was still working. He looked tired but happy. Gary saw him and called out, "Good night, my hard-working friend." Andy waved back. "Good night, Gary. Sleep well." When night finally came, the stars appeared one by one in the dark sky. The moon rose above the meadow, lighting up the soft grass. Gary sat quietly for a moment, looking at the stars. They twinkled like little lamps in the sky. He felt peaceful and proud of his day. Before falling asleep, he whispered, "Tomorrow, I will sing again. Life is too beautiful to waste on work." Then he closed his eyes and dreamed of sunny fields, music, and laughter, never thinking that soon the weather would change and summer would slowly begin to fade away. Chapter 4. A Friendly Warning. The days in the meadow passed quickly. The sun still shone brightly, but the air began to feel a little cooler in the mornings. The flowers were still colorful, but a few leaves had started to turn yellow. Summer was slowly coming to an end, though the animals were too busy or too happy to notice. Andy, the ant, continued his daily work. Every morning, he left his ant hill before sunrise, carrying small crumbs, grains, and seeds back to his home. His tiny legs were strong, and his heart was full of purpose. He knew that winter was not far away. The ants had to store enough food to last many months. One afternoon, Andy was carrying a large piece of bread across the meadow. It was heavy and the sun was hot, but he didn't stop. Suddenly, he heard a familiar sound, a happy tune floating in the air. He smiled because he already knew who it was. It was Gary the Grasshopper. He was sitting on a smooth rock under a tree, playing his violin and singing loudly. His voice echoed across the field, cheerful and carefree. He looked as happy as ever, his green wings shining in the sunlight. "Hello, Andy," Gary called out when he saw his friend. "Still working, I see. Don't you ever take a break?" Andy stopped and placed his piece of bread on the ground. He wiped the sweat from his face with his tiny leg and smiled kindly. "Hello, Gary. Yes, I'm working again. Winter is getting closer each day, and there is still a lot to do." Gary laughed and played a quick, joyful tune. "Oh, come on. Winter is months away. Why worry now? Look around, my friend. The sun is warm, the grass is green, and there's food everywhere. Enjoy life while you can." Andy looked at the tall grass waving in the breeze and nodded. "Yes, it's beautiful. But soon the wind will change, and the green grass will turn brown. The air will grow cold and food will disappear. That's why I'm saving everything now." Gary stopped playing for a moment. "You always talk about winter," he said with a little sigh. "You should relax. You work too hard. Life is short. Enjoy the good days." Andy smiled again, but this time his tone was gentle and serious. "I do enjoy my days, Gary, but I enjoy them by preparing for tomorrow. You see, when the snow comes, I will stay warm and safe inside my home with food to eat. What about you, my friend? Do you have a place to stay when the cold arrives?" Gary blinked and looked up at the sky. A small cloud drifted by. I haven't really thought about it," he said softly. "Maybe I'll find a place later. There's still time." Andy nodded patiently. "Maybe. But time passes quickly. Look, the leaves are already changing color. That means the season is turning. Please, Gary, start gathering food soon. Even a few seeds can help you later." Gary smiled, though he didn't look too sure. "You worry too much, Andy. I'll be fine. I always find something to eat. Besides, I'm not made for carrying heavy things like you ants. I prefer singing. Music makes me happy." Andy nodded again. "That's true, Gary. Your music is beautiful and it makes everyone smile. But happiness is even better when you are safe and warm. I'm your friend, and I just don't want you to suffer when the cold winds come." For a few seconds, Gary didn't speak. He looked at the bright green meadow around him. Everything still looked perfect. The sky was blue, the flowers were open, and bees buzzed happily. It was hard for him to imagine snow and cold wind. Finally, Gary laughed again and said, "Thank you for worrying, Andy. You're a good friend, but I'll think about it later. For now, I want to sing one more song before the day ends. Would you like to hear it?" Andy smiled and nodded. "Of course, Gary. I always like your songs." Gary lifted his violin and began to play. The melody was soft and sweet, like a warm breeze moving through the grass. Andy listened quietly for a few moments, feeling peaceful. The music was beautiful, but in his heart, he still felt worried for his friend. When the song ended, Andy picked up his piece of bread again. "That was wonderful, Gary. Thank you for the music, but I must go now. The sun is setting, and I still have work to do." Gary waved his hand and smiled. "Goodbye, Andy. Work well, my friend. I'll sing for you again tomorrow." As Andy walked away, he looked back once. Gary was still playing his violin under the golden sunset. His voice was light and full of joy, but Andy could see the dry leaves falling slowly around him. The wind was cooler now. Summer was fading, even if Gary didn't want to believe it. That evening, as Andy carried his last load home, he whispered softly to himself, "I hope my friend listens before it's too late." Chapter 5. The Grasshopper's Laughter. The days grew shorter, and the sun no longer felt as warm as before. The wind had changed. It now carried a soft, cool touch. Some flowers began to fade, and a few dry leaves floated down from the trees. The signs of autumn were everywhere. But in the middle of the meadow, Gary the Grasshopper was still singing, dancing, and laughing as if nothing had changed. He sat on a tall blade of grass, playing his violin with joy. His music was cheerful and full of energy. Birds flew past, listening to his tunes for a moment before flying away. Butterflies were fewer now, and bees didn't stay long, but Gary didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying his own song. Andy the ant, however, noticed every change. He and his friends worked harder each day. They carried more food into their anthill: seeds, grains, crumbs, and tiny leaves. The tunnels inside their home were now full, but Andy knew they still needed more. Winter could be long and difficult, and every bit of food mattered. One afternoon, while Andy was carrying a heavy seed across the meadow, he heard laughter. It was loud and full of joy. He looked up and saw Gary again, lying lazily on a warm rock, his violin beside him. Gary waved when he saw Andy. "Hello there, my hard-working friend," Gary shouted. "You're still carrying food?" "Oh, Andy, you never stop. Come here and rest a while." Andy smiled, but kept walking. "Hello, Gary. Yes, I'm still working. The weather is changing fast. The nights are getting colder. We must finish storing food before it's too late." Gary rolled over on his back and laughed loudly. "Too late? Nonsense. Look around you, Andy. The sun is shining, the sky is clear, and there's still plenty of food everywhere. Why worry about something that hasn't happened yet? You ants worry too much." Andy placed the seed down for a moment. He looked around. Yes, the meadow still looked green, but not as green as before. Some plants were dry and fewer insects buzzed around. "It may look fine now, Gary," Andy said gently, "but soon the cold winds will come. Please, start preparing. Collect some food for yourself." Gary sat up and smiled playfully. Oh, Andy, you sound like an old teacher giving lessons. Don't worry, I'm not afraid of a little cold. I can always find something to eat. You see, I live freely. I don't want to spend my life carrying food back and forth. I want to enjoy it. Andy sighed softly. Freedom is good, Gary, but being ready is also important. I work now so that later I can rest safely. You can still sing and prepare at the same time. Gary laughed again. Oh no, that's not for me. Work takes away all the fun. Look at you, always serious, always busy. Do you even know what it feels like to relax? Andy smiled kindly. Yes, I do. I rest when my work is done. Then I feel proud, because my effort keeps my family safe. You should try it, Gary. You might like the feeling. Gary grinned and picked up his violin. Maybe later. For now, I'll play a song for you, The Ants' March, he said with a laugh. He began to play a quick tune, pretending to march like an ant. He lifted his legs and moved back and forth, laughing loudly. Look, Andy! I'm working just like you. Andy couldn't help smiling, even though Gary was teasing him. You play well, Gary, he said. But remember, music can't fill your stomach when the snow falls. Gary chuckled. Oh, Andy! You always think about food. You need to think about fun once in a while. Life is short, my friend. Andy shook his head gently, picked up his seed again and said, Maybe so, but life can feel even shorter when you're hungry. Then he turned and began walking back to his anthill. Gary watched him go, still laughing softly. Poor ant, he said to himself. He works too hard. I'll play an extra song for him today. Then he began another tune, fast, happy, and full of energy. His music danced through the air, filling the meadow with joy. As the sun slowly went down, the sky turned orange and gold. The wind grew cooler, and the sound of Gary's violin echoed softly between the trees. Andy reached his anthill and looked back one last time. He could still hear Gary's laughter in the distance. Maybe he's right, Andy whispered. Maybe I worry too much, but I'd rather be ready than sorry. That night, Gary lay under a big leaf, still humming his songs. The air was chilly, but he didn't mind. He closed his eyes and smiled. Tomorrow will be another sunny day, he thought, and I will sing again. But high above, the stars shone cold and clear, and the wind whispered through the dry grass. The first signs of real change were coming, though Gary still laughed and sang, not knowing that summer was almost gone. Chapter 6. The First Cold Wind. One morning, the meadow looked different. The sun was still shining, but the air felt sharp and cool. The soft summer breeze had changed into something new, a cold wind that whispered through the tall grass. The flowers that once stood tall were now bending and closing their petals. The sky looked pale, and the green of summer was slowly turning into the gold and brown of autumn. Andy the ant woke up early, as always. He stepped outside his anthill and shivered slightly. The cold wind has come, he said to himself. Winter is near. He looked up at the gray clouds drifting across the sky. The time for rest and singing was ending. The time for warmth and preparation had begun. The other ants were already awake and working busily. They moved in a line, carrying the last bits of food into their safe home. Andy joined them right away. He carried seeds, grains, and tiny crumbs from the ground. Everyone worked quickly, knowing that soon the rain would fall and the meadow would be empty. While Andy worked, he thought about his friend Gary. He hadn't seen the grasshopper in a few days. I wonder what he's doing, Andy thought. I hope he finally listened to my warning. Just then, he heard a faint sound, a few soft notes from a violin. It was not as loud or joyful as before. The tune sounded slow and weak. Andy followed the sound until he found Gary sitting on a small rock under a cloudy sky. Gary, Andy called. There you are. I haven't seen you in days. How have you been? Gary looked up and smiled faintly. Oh, hello, Andy. I've been fine, just a bit lazy, I guess. The weather has changed so quickly, hasn't it? He rubbed his arms and shivered. Andy nodded. Yes, the cold wind is here. Soon it will be winter. Have you started collecting food? Gary laughed softly, though his voice sounded tired. Oh, Andy, I meant to start, but then I thought maybe the weather will stay nice a little longer. I played my violin, and before I knew it, the days had passed. Andy looked around. The trees nearby were losing their leaves. The grass was dry and brown in many places. Gary, he said seriously, you must start now. There's still a little time. Gather what you can before it's too late. Gary looked down at his empty hands. I don't have much to carry food with, he said. And besides, there isn't much left. The ground is almost bare. Andy sighed. That's why I told you to prepare earlier. But don't lose hope. You can still find some things if you try. Gary gave a small smile. You're a good friend, Andy. You always think about me. Maybe I should have listened to you sooner. The wind blew harder now, and both of them shivered. Andy felt the cold deep in his tiny legs. I must go, he said. My family needs me. Please, Gary. Take this. He placed a small crumb of bread beside the grasshopper. It's not much, but it might help you today. Gary looked surprised. Thank you, Andy. You worked so hard for this. I can't take your food. Andy smiled kindly. Friends help each other. But tomorrow, you must help yourself. Promise me you'll try. Gary nodded. I promise. Andy waved goodbye and walked back toward his anthill, the wind pushing gently against his body. Gary watched him go, feeling both grateful and a little ashamed. He looked at the crumb of bread, then at his violin. For the first time, he didn't feel like playing. The melody in his heart was quiet now. That night, the wind grew stronger. The grass bent low, and dry leaves danced through the air. The stars were hidden behind dark clouds. Gary curled up under a big leaf, trying to stay warm. The leaf moved in the wind, and small drops of cold rain began to fall. He shivered and closed his eyes tightly. Maybe tomorrow will be sunny again, he whispered. But deep down, he knew the warm days were over. Meanwhile, Andy and his friends were safe inside their anthill. The tunnels were warm, and the rooms were full of food. The ants rested happily after their long work. They listened to the wind outside but didn't feel afraid. They were ready for the long winter ahead. Outside, the meadow was silent except for the sound of the cold wind. The flowers were gone, and the trees stood bare. The cheerful songs of summer had faded away. Only the sound of rustling leaves and the lonely cry of the wind filled the night. Gary lay awake for a long time, thinking about Andy's words. Friends help each other, he whispered softly. But next time, I must help myself too. As the wind blew across the empty field, Gary realized how much he had lost. Not just food, but time. He promised himself that if he survived the winter, he would never make the same mistake again. Chapter 7. The Ants' Warm Home. The cold wind blew stronger each day. The sky stayed gray and the sun appeared only for a short time. The meadow that was once full of color now looked empty and quiet. The singing of birds had stopped and the sound of buzzing insects was gone. Everything seemed to be sleeping under the touch of winter. Inside the ant hill it was very different. Andy the ant and his family were safe and warm in their cozy home underground. The walls were made of soft dirt, and the small rooms were full of food. There were tiny pieces of bread, seeds, and dry grains stacked neatly in piles. The ants had worked very hard through summer and autumn, and now they could rest. Andy sat near the food room and smiled. "All our work was worth it," he said happily. "We have enough food for the whole winter." His mother nodded. "Yes, my dear, we do. The other ants and I are proud of you. You worked very hard and your planning helped us all." Andy felt warm inside, not only from the room's temperature but also from the feeling of pride. He remembered how he had carried food every day under the hot sun. It had been tiring, but now, seeing his family safe, he felt grateful. Outside, the wind howled across the meadow. Andy could hear it faintly through the ground. Sometimes the sound was like a whistle. Sometimes it was like a song of the cold. But inside, the anthill was quiet and peaceful. The ants talked softly, shared stories, and ate together. One evening, as they sat eating crumbs of bread, Andy's little sister asked, "Do you think the grasshopper is okay? The one who played music all summer?" Andy looked down. He hadn't seen Gary since the first cold wind came. He remembered the weak sound of Gary's violin and the sad look on his face. "I hope he's fine," Andy said quietly. "I told him to gather food, but I don't know if he did." His mother sighed. "Some creatures must learn through experience. You gave him good advice. Sometimes, that's all we can do." Andy nodded slowly. He still worried about his friend. The thought of Gary alone in the cold made him uneasy. But what could he do? The winter was dangerous for small creatures. Even strong ants didn't go outside now unless it was truly necessary. The next morning, snow began to fall. Tiny white flakes covered the meadow like a soft blanket. The air was silent, and the world turned white and still. Andy peered through the small opening near the entrance of the anthill and watched. The snow sparkled like tiny stars in the pale sunlight. It was beautiful, but also scary. Nothing could grow or move in this kind of cold. Days passed slowly. The ants stayed inside, eating carefully and sleeping often. They told stories about summer, about their adventures, and about the joy of warm sunshine. Andy listened and smiled, but his mind often went back to Gary. One afternoon, Andy's father noticed him staring at the entrance again. "You're thinking about your friend, aren't you?" he asked kindly. Andy nodded. "Yes, father. I can't stop worrying. What if he has no food? What if he's out there freezing?" His father put a leg gently on Andy's shoulder. "You have a kind heart, my son. But sometimes kindness must also be careful. If you go outside now, the cold might take you too." Andy understood. It was true. The world outside was dangerous now. Still, he whispered to himself, "If there's a chance, I want to help him." That night, while everyone slept, Andy lay awake. He thought about how Gary had smiled even when he was hungry. He remembered how Gary's songs made everyone happy in summer. The meadow had been full of joy because of him. He brought music when times were easy, Andy thought. Maybe I should bring help when times are hard. The next morning, Andy made a small plan. When the sun rose, he quietly took a few grains of food from the storage room. He wrapped them in a dry leaf to keep them safe. Then he walked toward the entrance and looked outside. The cold air rushed in, and the snow made his feet tingle. But Andy stood firm. "I'll find Gary," he said softly. "I can't let my friends suffer." He looked back one last time at the warm anthill. The firelight flickered gently, and his family slept peacefully inside. Andy took a deep breath, pulled the leaf bundle closer to his chest, and stepped out into the cold, white world. The snow crunched under his tiny feet as he began his journey. The meadow that once sang with music was silent now, but Andy's heart was full of warmth and courage. Chapter 8. The Grasshopper in Trouble. The snow covered the meadow like a thick white blanket. The wind blew softly, making the trees shake and the dry branches bend. Everything was cold, silent, and still. There were no sounds of buzzing bees, no songs of birds, and no music in the air. Winter had taken over completely. Andy the ant walked slowly through the snow. His tiny feet sank with every step, and the cold air made him shiver. He held a small leaf bundle close to his chest. It was full of grains and crumbs from his anthill. He had promised himself that he would find Gary, the grasshopper, and help him if he could. As Andy walked, he looked around carefully. The tall grass was gone, and most of the flowers were dry and brown. The once bright meadow was now white and empty. Where could he be? Andy whispered to himself. I hope I'm not too late. He walked past the old rock where Gary used to sit and play his violin. The rock was now covered in snow. There were no footprints, no sign of life. Andy's heart began to feel heavy. He started to worry that maybe Gary had already left, or worse, that he had not survived the cold. After walking a little farther, Andy noticed something strange. Under a large leaf, partly buried in the snow, he saw a small shape. He ran closer and gasped. It was Gary. The grasshopper was lying still, his body shaking slightly. His green color had turned pale, and his violin lay beside him, covered in frost. Gary! Gary, can you hear me? Andy cried. Gary opened his eyes slowly. Andy, is that you? His voice was weak and tired. Yes, it's me, Andy said, running closer. I've been looking for you. You're freezing. You need food and warmth. Gary tried to smile, but his lips trembled. I was so foolish, Andy. You told me to prepare, but I didn't listen. I thought the sun would shine forever. I thought I had time. Now I have nothing. Andy quickly opened his leaf bundle and took out some crumbs. Here, eat this. It's not much, but it will help. Gary looked at the food with tears in his eyes. You brought this for me? Of course, Andy said kindly. Friends help each other. You played songs for everyone in summer. Now it's my turn to help you. Gary ate slowly, his hands shaking. After a few bites, he sighed softly. Thank you, Andy. You are a true friend. I don't deserve this kindness. Andy shook his head. Don't say that. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. Gary nodded weakly. The color began to return to his face, but he was still very cold. The wind blew harder, and Andy knew they couldn't stay outside any longer. Gary, he said firmly, you must come with me. My home is warm and safe. You can stay there until spring. Gary looked surprised. In your anthill? But that's for ants. I don't want to trouble your family. Andy smiled. You won't be trouble. My family will understand. You need help, and we can give it. Gary tried to stand, but his legs were stiff. Andy helped him up, one step at a time. It was not easy. The snow was deep and the wind blew in their faces, but Andy didn't give up. He walked slowly beside Gary, guiding him toward the anthill. After a long and difficult walk, they finally reached the small entrance. Warm air drifted out from inside. Andy called softly, "Mother! Father! I'm back!" His mother came running. "Andy! We were so worried. You went out in this cold?" Then she saw Gary standing behind him. "Mother," Andy said gently, "this is my friend Gary. He's very weak. Please, can he stay with us?" Gary bowed his head shyly. "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your home. I didn't plan well. I have learned my lesson." Andy's mother looked at him kindly. "Every creature deserves a second chance," she said softly. "Come inside, both of you." The ants helped Gary into the warm tunnel. They gave him a dry leaf to rest on and shared some food with him. The warmth of the anthill slowly brought life back into his body. As Gary rested, he looked at Andy and said, "You saved me, my friend. I will never forget this." Andy smiled. "That's what friends are for. When summer comes again, we'll both be ready, you with your songs and I with my work." Gary nodded, his eyes shining. "Yes," he said softly. "Next time, I will sing and prepare too." That night, for the first time in many days, the meadow wasn't silent. Inside the anthill, the sound of soft violin music filled the tunnels. Gary played gently, his heart full of gratitude. The ants listened and smiled. The music brought warmth that no fire could give. Outside, the snow still fell, but inside the anthill, there was friendship, kindness, and hope, the true warmth of winter. Chapter 9. The Lesson of Winter. Winter had settled over the meadow. Snow covered every blade of grass, every flower, and every rock. The world was quiet and white, and the cold wind blew steadily across the field. It was a season of silence and stillness, but inside Andy's anthill, life continued warmly. Gary the Grasshopper stayed close to Andy and his family. The warmth of the tunnels slowly brought life back to him. He had never felt such comfort before. The ants shared their food generously, seeds, crumbs, and tiny pieces of bread. Gary ate carefully, grateful for every bite. The cold outside made him realize how important Andy's advice had been. One morning, while Gary sat on a dry leaf eating, he spoke softly. "Andy, I understand now. I was foolish. Summer felt endless, and I thought I could wait, but winter came quickly, and I almost didn't survive. Your warning was true." Andy smiled gently. "I'm glad you understand, Gary. It's never too late to learn. The important thing is that you are safe now. But remember this lesson. Working and planning are as important as enjoying life." Gary nodded slowly. He looked around at the cozy tunnels and the neatly stacked food. "I see that now. You worked hard all summer and your family is safe and warm. I didn't think about tomorrow when I was playing and singing. I only wanted fun." Andy's mother came over and added kindly, "That's why preparation matters, Gary. Fun is important, but it must be balanced with work. Life has seasons: summer, autumn, winter, and spring. Each season needs its own care." Gary listened carefully. He realized that summer had given him joy, but it had also taught him a hard lesson. "I will never forget this," he said. "Next summer I will sing, but I will also prepare. I will balance work and play." Andy nodded. That's good, Gary. Every creature must find balance. Even ants enjoy the sunlight sometimes, and even grasshoppers can learn to store food. Days passed slowly. Gary began helping the ants in small ways. He moved tiny crumbs into storage rooms, cleaned leaves from the tunnels, and watched how carefully the ants worked together. At first, his legs were weak, and his movements were slow. But with Andy's guidance, he learned quickly. Gary also noticed something else. Even though the world outside was cold and silent, inside the anthill there was life, friendship, and warmth. It's strange, he said one evening. The snow outside is freezing, but inside it feels like summer again, in a different way. Andy smiled. That's the true lesson, Gary. Hard work and preparation bring security and peace. When you are ready, even the coldest winter cannot harm you. Gary thought about the meadow. He remembered the green grass, the flowers, the music, and the sun. But he also remembered the cold wind, the snow, and how alone he had felt. I will never take summer for granted again, he whispered. I will enjoy it, but I will also plan for winter. Andy placed a small seed beside Gary. Start practicing now. It's a good habit. When spring comes, you will be ready for the next summer too. Gary looked at the seed and nodded. Yes, Andy. I will remember this forever. Summer, music, and joy, and preparation for winter. That night the snow fell gently outside. The wind whispered softly through the empty meadow. Inside the anthill, Gary played a quiet tune on his violin. This time, the music was calm and thoughtful. Andy listened, smiling. His friend had learned an important lesson. Joy and work could exist together, and preparation made happiness last longer. Gary finished his song and looked at Andy. Thank you, he said. Not only for saving me, but for teaching me how to live wisely. I will never forget it. Andy smiled warmly. That is what friends are for, Gary. We care for each other. And now you know the value of hard work, planning, and friendship. Outside, the meadow was covered in white snow, but inside the anthill, the world was bright, warm, and safe. Winter had brought its lesson, and Gary had learned it well. He realized that life was not only about joy, but also about responsibility, preparation, and caring for others. From that day on, the grasshopper sang, worked, and learned. And when the spring arrived, the meadow would be full of music, life, and new beginnings, for both the ant and the grasshopper. Chapter 10. The Lesson of Hard Work. Spring finally arrived. The snow melted slowly and the meadow began to wake up again. Tiny green shoots pushed through the soil, flowers opened their colorful petals, and the warm sun returned to the sky. Birds sang, bees buzzed, and butterflies danced from flower to flower. Life had returned to the meadow. Inside the anthill, Andy the ant and his family were busy once more. Though winter was over, the ants continued their work. They repaired tunnels, cleaned rooms, and organized the food they had stored. Hard work was part of their daily life, and they did it cheerfully because they knew the value of preparation. Gary the grasshopper watched quietly at first. He remembered the long, cold winter when he had no food and no shelter. He remembered Andy helping him, saving him from the freezing meadow. That experience had changed him. Now he wanted to do more than just sing. He wanted to learn the value of hard work. Andy noticed his friend standing by the entrance and called, "Gary, come help us today. There is plenty to do." Gary nodded and joined the ants. At first, it was difficult. His legs were not used to carrying seeds or moving crumbs into the tunnels. He struggled to lift even small pieces. But Andy was patient. "Take your time," he said. "Even small steps matter. Every little effort counts." Gary worked slowly, but he worked with care. He picked up crumbs and stacked them neatly. He carried seeds one by one into the storage room. Step by step, he began to understand the patience and effort that the ants had shown all year. The work was tiring, but it also felt good. Gary realized that hard work brought a different kind of joy, the joy of helping others and being prepared. As the day went on, Gary started humming a song while working, but this time, his song was not only cheerful, it was thoughtful. It told a story of summer, of lessons learned, and of gratitude. The ants listened and smiled, enjoying both his music and his effort. Andy's mother came by and said, "Gary, you are learning well. Not only are you singing, but you are also helping. That is the balance every creature needs, joy and responsibility together." Gary nodded. "I understand now," he said. "I thought only music mattered in life, but I see that hard work and preparation are just as important. I want to be ready for every season, not only enjoy summer." Andy smiled. "That's the lesson we all learn. Summer is wonderful, but winter teaches wisdom. Hard work is the key to safety, happiness, and peace." By the afternoon, Gary was carrying larger seeds, moving faster, and working with a smile. The other ants cheered quietly, happy to see him learning so quickly. Gary felt proud. He had survived winter, learned an important lesson, and now could help others. When the work was done, Andy said, "Let's rest now. We've done enough for today." Gary sat down and looked around. The anthill was warm, full of food, and alive with activity. The sun shone through the entrance, and the meadow outside looked bright and green. He realized how lucky he was. "Andy," he said softly, "I will never forget what you taught me. Hard work and preparation make life better. I will sing and enjoy life, but I will never be careless again." Andy smiled. "I am proud of you, Gary. Remember, every day is an opportunity to learn, work, and help others. That is the true meaning of life." Gary nodded. He looked out at the meadow, at the birds, the flowers, and the bright sun. He felt hope, happiness, and determination. "I will be ready for every season," he whispered. "And I will always help my friends, just like you helped me." That evening, as the sun set over the meadow, Gary played a beautiful tune on his violin. It was a song of gratitude, friendship, and hard work. Andy and the ants listened, smiling, as the music filled the warm tunnels of the anthill. Outside, the meadow glowed in golden light. The snow had melted completely, the flowers were blooming, and the wind was gentle and soft. The lesson of hard work had been learned, and both the ant and the grasshopper were ready for the seasons to come. From that day on, Gary balanced his music with preparation, joy with responsibility, and play with work. He knew the importance of planning, effort, and friendship. And the meadow, full of life and color, became a place of happiness, learning, and harmony. For the ant, the grasshopper, and every creature that lived there. Thank you for reading with me today. I hope you enjoyed the story of the ant and the grasshopper. This story is not only fun, but it also teaches us important lessons. We learned that hard work and planning are very important. We also learn the value of friendship and helping each other. By reading this story, you also practiced your English. You learn new words, phrases, and simple sentences. You listened to English and tried to understand the meaning. This is a very good way to improve your English every day. Remember, practice makes perfect. If some words were difficult, don't worry. You can listen again and read along. You can also write down new words in your notebook. Try to use them in your own sentences. Step by step, your English will get better. Don't forget, learning English can be fun. Stories make learning easy and interesting. You can practice reading, listening, and understanding at the same time. Every day, just a little practice can help a lot. Thank you for joining me on this story. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. I will bring more fun and easy stories for you to learn English. Remember, friends, learning English is a journey. Keep reading, keep listening, and keep practicing. See you in the next story. Goodbye, and keep learning English.